It's an ordinary day at Columbia University in New York, with all the students feeling the presence of Dr. Alexander Hartigan in the hallways. However, the doctor's preoccupation with his work causes him to forget a date with Emma, his girlfriend. Hartigan is a dreamer, and although it is his first year as an associate professor at the university, he wants the best for his students, not to be pawns in society, following the same patterns and wearing the same top hats as everyone else. Back home, he gets ready in his lab for his appointment with his colleague David Philby, who urges Hartigan to be a little more conservative and not obsess over his inventions and scientific fantasies. Just before arriving for their appointment, Hartigan is distracted by a malfunctioning automobile prototype, whose owner offers him a ride, but he prefers going on with his date, not without some hesitation. Now at Emma's side, Hartigan trembles with nervousness at wanting to express his desire for engagement, but manages to move forward and offers Emma a ring, which she happily accepts. However, their evening is quickly interrupted by a mugger that appears out of the forest, demanding all their valuables. Emma tries to keep her ring, but the robber asks for it. After a brief struggle, the most tragic outcome occurs, as Emma is shot at point-blank range, dying at the hands of her fiancé. 4 years later, Alexander Hartigan is more obsessed with science than ever, which worries the housekeeper, Mrs. Watchett, and Philby, who asks him to come out of his stupor and move on with his life. The doctor's depression drives Philby away, only to later reveal his greatest invention, a time machine, which he will use to get his beloved back. The machine ends up working perfectly, going back to the night he lost Emma. Hartigan is thrilled to find her alive in front of him again but remembers the first night's events, so instead of going through the forest, he decides to go to the city immediately. On his walk, Hartigan completely ignores the prototype car that passes around him again, as he only has eyes for Emma. She senses something odd about him, but he only tells her to go home and stay there. He professes a few last loving words to her, sparing her death that night and leaving the rest to his past self. Just before leaving, Hartigan heads off to buy Emma the flowers he promised but could never give, but as he enters the florist, a car accident occurs, running Emma over. The dejected doctor, far from being sad, is confused, knowing that fate does not want him to be with Emma, so he plans another trip in the time machine to find out how to solve his dilemma, this time to New York in 2030, where humans have even been able to colonize and settle on the moon. Hartigan goes to the public library, where he meets Vox, a holographic assistant who claims to have all the knowledge in the world. Amazed by this, Hartigan asks him for access to information about time travel, but this is taken as science fiction. Even himself is listed among the names of people connected with time travel, primarily novelists. Frustrated, the doctor decides to travel further into the future, to the year 2037, where a catastrophe has struck the world, leaving it in ashes. Rescuers try to help the confused man, who asks them what happened. Apparently, the moon broke apart after the moon colony's demolitions, having massive repercussions on Earth. The doctor flees back to the time machine out of panic, hurting and bumping himself along the way, accidentally charting a course into the distant future, where ages pass and the world changes radically. His journey ends in the year 802.701, where he is rescued by a group of indigenous people who heal, clean, and feed him. Upon regaining consciousness, he dresses and has his first encounter with one of his rescuers, an Aboriginal boy. Hartigan discovers that they live in a community of huts clinging to the mountain's edges, and the whole tribe is surprised by his appearance. One of them, a girl, manages to communicate with him, claiming to know the stone language. According to her, everyone learns it during childhood, but they tend to forget it over time. The village chief thinks they should get rid of the stranger by throwing him out of the river, but the girl thinks otherwise. Hartigan explains that he comes from the past, something the girl can't quite understand. She introduces herself as Mara and convinces the others that the stranger is a wandering idiot, and that he hit his head on his journey, so he manages to get out of the situation in an airy way. Hartigan explains the customs of his past world at night, something Mara's brother, Kalen, finds fascinating. They let them stay with them as they sleep, and Mara tells him that their parents left the place, with Hartigan fascinated by how much the world has changed to that point in history. Looking up at the sky, he notices the moon destroyed, with a small belt of space fragments around it. The doctor asks her why they take their boats out of the water at night, believing it is for fear of being stolen. Mara doesn't know that word, and offers to go looking for flowers the next day. In the forest, an evil presence advances, concluding in a skull monument, but it ends up being Hartigan's nightmare, causing him to wake up. Kalen had a nightmare too, but his sister comforts him. When Hartigan explains the dream to Mara, she understands it in detail, as she says that everyone there has experienced the same nightmare before. He asks about the word Morlock, but Mara claims it is just a children's story. The next day, Hartigan witnesses the changes to the society of the past, with the tribe keeping remnants of the cities as memorabilia. Mara asks him why he decided to travel back in time, and he explains that it was to understand why the past cannot be changed. She doesn't understand these reasons, wondering why anyone would want to do this, but soon understands it is to get someone back. On a canoe ride, Hartigan wonders why there are no older people in the village, but Mara only replies that they set out from that place so as not to stay in the past. They arrive at a field of mills, where Kaylin welcomes them excitedly, wanting to know more stories about New York and the people of the past. Mara and Hartigan make it to the time machine, and out of nowhere, she asks the doctor to take her little brother into the past, changing to a fearful stance. He's puzzled by that, but shouts and roars in the distance tell them that the village is in danger. The screams intensify, and they find the entire village evacuating the place. Upon arrival, Hartigan encounters a humanoid monkey-like creature and runs for safety. Soon more creatures arrive, throwing darts at the villagers, and one of them manages to hit Mara. On close inspection, Hartigan notices a black viscous liquid on the dart, but before he can analyze it, he and the other villagers end up surrounded by the creatures coming out from under the ground. They gag and capture several village members using superhuman strength and primitive hunting tactics. One of the beings comes upon Kaylin, and Hartigan goes to his rescue. A chase begins, and follows the doctor hanging from one of the mills, with the creature grabbing him by the feet. After some struggle, the beast falls to the ground from several meters away, dropping unconscious for a few moments. Upon awakening, it climbs back up to lunge at the doctor and succeeds in bringing him down, next to it. Kaylin comes to the rescue, using fire to drive the creature away, escaping through subway conduits hidden in the sand. When Hartigan arrives in the area, he sees how Mara is captured and taken to the creature's hideout. The doctor proposes to go to the rescue of the captured, but the people don't understand his proposal since according to them, this is how life in their village works. When Hartigan reproaches the villagers' lack of defense, the leader tells him that those who fight are the first to be captured. He then goes to talk to Kaylin, telling him that they must do something about it, but the boy only comments that once the creatures capture others, there's nothing else to discuss, confirming that they were the Morlocks. Despite this, he learns of a place where the ghosts dwell, and goes there with Hartigan at night. The place ends up being a space with paraphernalia from the past, including several holograms of Vox, which Hartigan remembers from his visit to the museum. Although Vox's software no longer updates automatically, his collected information tells him that there are now two dominant species on Earth, one living on the surface and the other living in the depths. Vox has generated a pessimistic consciousness over the years, and talks about how overwhelming it is to have all the knowledge of the world available, but not be able to do anything about it. He even remembers his earlier encounter with Hartigan and tells him that he knows about the Morlocks from a member of the village who managed to escape and stayed there with him, talking. The doctor asks the hologram for the truth, but the hologram warns him about how crude the truth can be. Vox tells him that his former friend came from the east of the forest and that he could find answers there. As he goes, he encounters the same skull monument from his nightmares. Hartigan says he will go alone to rescue Mara, and Kaylin tells him that the Morlocks also took his watch with them, something the doctor doesn't understand. He goes down a cliff, until finding the entrance to a cave. Inside, he finds complex mechanisms, unbefitting a tribe like the people on the surface. He follows a pair of them through a system of tunnels, and sees how the beings have their own metallurgical society underground. Hartigan ends up in a butcher's room, where there are various torture tools and a pile of clothes, with Mara's necklace on it. After accidentally pulling a lever, he falls into a water well with human remains, and is found by the Morlocks, who take him prisoner and lock him in a basement. The basement turns out to be more spacious than expected, and after descending some stairs, Mara is found in a cage with a figure on a throne in front of them. The figure is the Über-Morlock, the leader of the tribe, and he explains that since the moon's destruction, the human race was divided into two sections, those above and those below. The Morlocks reproduced in castes, some being the brain and others the muscle, easy to manipulate telepathically. They capture humans on the surface to use as food, and only a few, the most optimal, are spared to serve as receptacles for new Morlocks. He also explains that he is using his telepathic powers at that moment just to keep the Morlocks at bay, for without it, they would deplete the food reserves in a matter of months. The Über-Morlock reviews Hartigan's memories and calls him a hypocrite for criticizing their lifestyle, when his time traveling is equally unnatural. Hartigan sees at the back of the room his old watch box, and is transported to his old laboratory with the blueprints for the time machine. He finds Emma with their dreamy children, the life he never had. The Über-Morlock tells him the reason why he can't change the past, and it's because Emma's death caused him to create the time machine, so he would use it to rescue her. With Emma alive, there would be no machine, creating a time paradox. The creature reveals the time machine to Hartigan, offering it to him. The doctor asks for his watch as well, and the Über-Morlock hands it over, but just at that, Hartigan pulls him towards, starting a struggle. He activates the time machine in the middle of the fight, but it is no match for the leader's physical superiority. Hartigan destroys a valve, distracting the Über-Morlock and causing him to hang by the man's neck outside the machine's range. Time passes outside the machine, with the leader rapidly aging to dust. Once safe, Hartigan sees how the machine's year now reads over 635 millions, with the world now destroyed and ruled by the Morlocks, so he makes a final decision. He travels back to the year 800,000 to rescue Mara, using his own watch to jam the time travel process, managing to escape. He and Mara confront the remaining Morlocks, and try to get out of the tunnels. The machine launches a time wave, aging the creatures and turning them to dust, with the pair escaping just in time. Mara regrets that Hartigan has lost his machine, but he no longer cares, as he has put his past behind him. Time passes, and the tribe now entertains themselves by listening to past tales from Vox, enjoying their newfound peace. Hartigan tells Mara and Kalen about what his old lab was like, and about Philby and Mrs. Watchett, who in a parallel memory, are glad that their friend is finally in a happier place. Philby tells Mrs. Watchett about how he and his wife are going to need a new housekeeper, offering the job to her. She accepts it, at least until Mr. Hartigan returns. Philby leaves the house, throwing off his top hat, honoring his friend. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.